Tiger Woods or Jack Nicklaus? Babe Ruth or Willie Mays? Abraham Lincoln or George Washington? Michael Jordan or LeBron James? There have been endless bar arguments about who's the greatest. If you're with a bunch of people over beers and you start this conversation, it'll go deep into the night. Who was the best ball player or who was the best president? Or my favorite bar argument actually is grizzly bear or gorilla. And in that argument, it's who would win if they fought each other. So listen, my friends, pick the grizzly bear. Because if you don't, he'll beat up the gorilla and then come after you. Or sometimes it's like, what's the best movie? You can be in endless conversations, like say maybe Casablanca or Shawshank Redemption. Listen, friends, simply do not ever disagree with someone that loves Shawshank Redemption. Don't do it. Their love of it is so close to their vital organs. I once accidentally said in a bar argument, I said, "Are you sure that movie's not a little saccharine?" Whoa, Mo, don't do that. They love it so much. In fact, in a fight, I would take someone whom you just disrespected about Shawshank Redemption over a grizzly bear. They love it so much. It's a good movie. If you happened upon two philosophers in a bar, there is an essential bar argument that has happened in philosophy for thousands of years. On one side of this basic argument are what called philosophical idealists. The other side are called philosophical physicalists. And what they're arguing about is what is the primary aspect of reality? The idealists believe that consciousness is primary. They don't believe that atoms could be put together to somehow create consciousness. How could consciousness come from dead things? So they believe consciousness is actually ubiquitous or ingrained in reality itself. The physicalists believe no. Atoms are most real, particles, and they somehow combine to form everything you know about reality. This has been the bar argument of philosophers forever. I actually take a side in a big way. I'm with the idealists. I think consciousness is primary for a very simple reason. You only even know about matter through consciousness. How could matter be primary if you've never actually directly encountered it? You only know things through your consciousness. So to my mind, of course, consciousness is more primary, but I have a dog in this fight. Because it's essential to me that we hold consciousness as primary. Because if we do, then values aren't just ideas. Values make up reality itself. Follow me. We say God is love. God is an infinite consciousness. Values only reside in consciousness. So when I say the word love, I don't just mean a feeling. When I say the word love, I don't just mean an emotion. I mean that which is holding reality itself together. Values, all the values like love and justice and patience and courage and forbearance and prudence, all the great values, they're real. And they're essential to reality itself. All of this is to get to the fact I was reading Philip Goff last week. Philip Goff is one of my favorite philosophers, and he is decidedly a philosophical idealist. He thinks that mind or consciousness is primary. And I've always loved his writing. He's about, I don't know, mid-40s. He actually plays in a rock band in England. But he's also in England a professor of philosophy, too. Really like this guy. And I was reading him, and all of a sudden, he starts talking about how he's going to church. He's just started going to church regularly. And this blew me away because he's a philosophical atheist too. He doesn't believe anything about what the church says in terms of theology. And he says he's going to church now all the time. And he goes on to describe why he goes to church. Get this. Because he likes it. I love this. He just likes it. He doesn't believe the theology, but you go to church and you hear live music. You get to hear someone give a talk, and he just thinks it's intrinsically fun. So he finds himself going to church. And he goes on to explain there's something about being in a village. He says it feels like when you go to church, you're in a village and you get to practice being a good neighbor. And he says he's just really enjoying that, just having a time once a week where you're in a village and you're trying to be your best self, and not in some oppressive way, just be a good neighbor. I wish more people just would grab onto the fact you don't have to believe certain things to come here. In fact, I so trust in the beauty of Jesus Christ. You don't have to buy into any of the theology about Jesus, but if you're around here, you'll start to be drawn to what he's about. I'm not saying you may never be really theological, but I trust he is so alluring. I mean, his compassion, his love, his wisdom, it's magnetic. I wish we wouldn't think church is so much about believing things as some of those more basic aspects. Well, anyway, 2 weeks ago I had a Sunday off, and I went to church at a different place. I rarely have an opportunity to do this. And I went to a church where they believe a lot. And a lot of what they believe, I disagree with a lot. A couple weeks ago, not in this state, I'm not going to name where, I decided to visit a Jehovah's Witness congregation. Jehovah's Witnesses. I'd never been. I've been a minister my whole life. I've gone to a lot of different, I've never been to a Jehovah's Witness church service, ever. So I went to a Kingdom Hall. And let me tell you of this. As I approached the building, the buildings, Kingdom Halls, are incredibly plain looking. They look like a mix of like a dental office with a rental or like a real estate office. And do you know why? Because they're done by a quick build. Do you know about a quick build? The Jehovah's Witness, when they decide to put up a Kingdom Hall, they'll do it in 2 weekends. And they'll put it up, and it's very plain, and it just doesn't fit my aesthetics. I love all this kind of ancient stuff, and I love a sacred feeling, but I walked into this low-slung building with a low ceiling and fluorescent lighting, and it's just not my style, right? So I was kind of going, oh. And as I'm sitting down, I noticed like every dude had a tie on. And the churches I'm used to, like you wear a tie when it's fun, you feel like doing it. It's like you just feel like it. So some people here and there might have a tie. I put a tie on because it goes well with a robe, but you just do it if you want. Every single dude had a tie on. I didn't. I kind of stood out, And I noticed every dude had a really bad haircut. But that made me feel at home because I have a bad haircut. I mean, I have the exact same haircut I've had since kindergarten. It's there. So then I felt more, I'm with my people now. And as the service began, I began to realize how much I disagreed with so much of what was being said. The Jehovah's Witnesses are biblical fundamentalists. In fact, sociologists of religion will tell you they are the most fundamentalist Christian group in America. And they're biblical fundamentalists, and it just always seems to me that when you focus in on certain lines in the Bible, there's always some power move being made, and then you end up putting down like gay people or women, or you're doing something. And I've always thought of the Bible as something to cherish and celebrate. And when I read the Bible, I get a chance to encounter Jesus Christ, and it's such a beautiful spiritual thing. And I hear the whole story of the faith, and I treasure the Bible. But the idea of like honing in on certain sentences from an ancient culture about how to live, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I noticed I was like disagreeing with everything, and they believe the world is governed by Satan, so you have to separate yourself from the world. And that sort of oppositional stuff didn't make sense to me. And as I'm sitting there, I realized that I'm becoming super judgy. I mean, I'd gone there to worship God, but I was getting really judgy. And not just that, I began to feel superior. Like, well, my religion is so much more intellectually sophisticated. And my religion is so much more inclusive and loving. And I knew my mind was going to everything about the Jehovah's Witness I didn't like, and that's not a way to worship. It's not a good state of your heart anytime. I was feeling judgy and superior. And I thought to myself, I got to change that. It is so easy to start feeling superior. And as I'm sitting in this Jehovah's Witness worship, it goes like an hour and 45 minutes, so I had a lot of time to self-reflect. A lot of time. And I found myself beginning to think about some key Buddhist principles. I thought this was kind of funny. I'm sitting there thinking about Buddhism, but the Buddhist tradition's been very important to me, particularly the way that they'll focus on what is unwholesome thinking, unwholesome patterns of thought. And they'll self-reflect very deeply about that. And in Buddhism, there's a concept of mana. And mana is a type of unwholesome thinking. Mana has to do with arrogance or pride. And what the Buddhists will teach you is that we all are trying to construct a self-image, and our self-image is very important to us. Mana will make you think, man, that's everything. My self-image, what I think of myself. And they say the primary way you will construct it is by constantly comparing yourself to others around you. And as you do these constant comparisons, mana will tend to make you compare the best part of yourself with the worst part of someone else so you can feel superior. So this is a game we'll do a lot. We'll compare ourselves to others, go, well, boy, I'm better than that. Or my ideas are better than that. So you're comparing yourself all the time. But the Buddhists say this is self-defeating because something will happen. If you begin comparing yourself with everybody around you, it'll start to go negative. You'll actually then also begin to compare the best in them with the worst in you. You'll start looking around and go, well, that person's so much smarter than me. Or that person's got it all together. Or that person is so much more talented. I mean, I hear Justin sing, and I think I can't do that. And I start, they say comparisons will begin a process then of self-loathing. And that if you are caught in comparisons, you will be miserable. There I was in that Jehovah congregation, and mana had taken over, and I was feeling arrogance and pride, and look at me and look at them. But then I remembered another Buddhist concept they believe can help you escape constant comparisons. It's called mudita. And mudita is this lovely idea that you have the chance, if you see someone who's really happy, to share in that joy. Mudita is to simply share in the good things happening for other people. So you no longer compare. If that person seems like they have it really all together, you experience pleasure or joy, mudita, at someone else's good fortune or joy. Oh, and this would be the key to happiness itself. Happiness would always be available to you. No matter if you're in a sad time, if there's always someone that's happy around you, mudita would allow you to access that happiness. And then as I'm sitting there with the Jehovah's, I remembered the Sermon on the Mount. And it was telling me not to judge people. But there was a moment, and I remembered it, where Jesus says, you do have to judge ideas. You still are going to have to judge what are the consequences. And I do think there are some bad consequences to authoritarian religion like that. I will judge ideas, but Jesus is saying, don't judge the people. Don't judge the person. And I began to notice around me, it was lovely people around me. They were being warm to me and inviting. They were creating community. They were trying to move towards God. And I began to realize that they just have this intrinsic dignity. And why? That sure, I might have to discern about ideas, but that we should approach everyone with unconditional positive regard, even if we disagree with them. And I went on a reverie about we're about to enter a political season right now, and it's going to be intense. And you'll begin to judge human beings, but we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to judge ideas and what are good ideas or bad ideas, but that every person has inherent worth and dignity. And thank God I began to just be appreciative of their love and faith around me and the togetherness that was happening. Oh, by the way, Babe Ruth, Jack Nicklaus, Michael Jordan.